Hello YouTube, and welcome to my new series, Perfecting Mid Lane. In this series, I wish to help you improve your gameplay by adding and expanding upon your fundamentals. I thought I would start off with early game trading, or trading within the laning phase, as it is one of the areas in which I need to improve the most myself, and also because I think people have a bit of a misconception regarding the meaning behind trading. I don't think the best people at trading are your typical river mains that get all the attention, just because they know how to take advantage of all the animation cancelling that the champion offers, but rather the people that trade by the rules of boxing, which is hit your opponent while avoiding to get hit yourself. It is through that lens I think you should view trading. This won't be a gameplay video. In fact, it won't even feature any sorts of gameplay. It will mainly be a video on how to improve your mid lane fundamentals. It will be all the obvious and visible things that really are important, but that people will overlook usually. Uh, it's the kind of things that an average player might not keep in mind when he's autopiloting through the game. And I think if players put more thoughts into things like these, that anyone actually can climb if they just want to. And that is ultimately my goal with these videos. Not only to help myself improve and climb, but also to help you guys climb. So when taking all these different aspects that I'm about to go through into account, you should become a more stable and reliable player who in all ways is more aware and alert inside of the game. Now I divided all the different aspects of trading into 4 groups: champions, runes, starting item slash build, and then I have an additional category that involves other things that might affect the mid lane in particular. Now remember, the things I will go through are not matchup specific, more of a general idea on how to think and what to take into consideration inside of the game to more easily get an advantage. There will be some examples occasionally, but the idea is not to give examples, but rather the knowledge which you can apply in the game yourself. Uh, and then by trial and error becoming better. As you apply the knowledge and actually think about all these things that I'm about to go through, you will improve at the game. That's a promise. So let's start off with champions. Now, there's a lot of things to consider, but I will start with the most obvious things. That's a thing you can tell already when you're in the loading screen. That would be the summoner spells. Uh, by looking at your opponent's summoner spells, you can determine what kind of a game they will be playing. Is the enemy running TP, Ignite, Cleanse, Barrier, or whatever? Try to consider how they might affect your chances of dueling them. Also in advance, if you know you're up against a champion with heavy sustain, for example Vladimir, Nasus, Sylas even, think about whether you want to run Ignite for more kill pressure. I think there's a thought process amongst, well, lower ranked people that all high elo players play with TP, and that's just bullshit. There's a lot of people, especially assassin players, but also mage players who just run Ignite because they want to cheese early kills. And that's a perfectly good strat. You just have to know what you're doing. And for the second part, it is type and matchup. And although it's not as simple as versing a fire type Pokemon versus a grass type Pokemon, the idea behind it is quite similar. You don't want to pick yourself into a counter matchup, especially if you get to pick after your opponent. And if you're forced to blind pick, I would suggest picking a neutral champ that doesn't have much counterplay. That would be a champion like Syndra, Yone, I don't know, mages in general are quite safe because they're long range and they can just use their abilities to farm. But it's not just about getting countered or countering your opponent yourself, but about build path. What are you going to build? Are you playing against a heavy sustain champion? Are you playing against a heavy poke champion or just a skirmisher? Are you gonna rush Mercs, Grievous Wounds, Vamp Scepter, or just ability haste boots? Your item builds should usually change in between different matchups. Then auto attack range. Is your auto attack range way shorter than your enemies? AKA, are you melee versus ranged? who has the faster animation, which one of you can throw in an auto attack in between abilities, which champion has more mobility. Auto attacks actually deal a lot of damage even for mages in the early game. If you get to weave in a lot of auto attacks, you're gonna benefit from it. You have to just be careful about the minion waves. You don't want to attract too much minion attention because then they're gonna DPS the shit out of you. But if you can zone them out far enough to actually poke them with abilities and auto attacks without getting minion aggro, then you're in a really good place. And if the situation is the opposite, that they're zoning you, then either let them zone you, go roam, or call your jungler for help, or try to trade with them yourself. If they just used an ability to try and poke you and they missed, then you have an opportunity to go hit them back. And then for the most important part of this slide, hence why it's yellow, it's the abilities. I want you to match your abilities against your opponents. Who has more sustain? Who has more damage? What about burst? CC? Mobility? Which champion has a dash? Which champion doesn't? Which champion has one crucial ability that they need to hit in order to win the trade? For example, again, Ahri, Syndra, I don't know, Xerath, Sylas even. If they miss their charm, stuns, they're not going to be able to do as much. Now, if you always use your abilities without thinking too much, for instance, if you're playing Ahri against an Akshan, and you throw your charm and you miss, you bet a good Akshan is going to slingshot himself in and just kill you. You have to be wary, and you have to be careful with how you use your abilities. If your opponent uses their abilities to farm, then that will make it way easier for you to actually trade with them. If they don't have their abilities up, then you should definitely trade if you have all your abilities up, that is. And just as a tip, if someone is really good at juking your skill shots, try firing them when they are stuck in their auto attack animation. Then for runes, you won't win a lane solely because of your rune choice or your opponent's runes choices, but they will give you a slight advantage if you know what you're doing. I think mastering the art of picking your runes will actually help you a lot more than you think yourself. Possibly. I don't know what you think. So, I guess that's a stupid thing to say. But I would not just recommend copying your rune page of Professor or Mobifier or iBlitz or whatever people are using nowadays. Instead, try to learn what they actually do and change, or at the very least, look through your rune page before every new game or matchup. In terms of trading, again, whose runes is better? Now, trading doesn't necessarily mean you have to deal a lot of damage. It can also mean you deal a small bit of damage, but you heal up yourself. So, does your opponent have Electrocute, Fleet Footwork, Grasp, whatever? Which rune will help you or help your opponent the most? Now, Electrocute will definitely give your opponent more burst, while Fleet will give him more sustain. I think Conqueror and Grasp depends on the champion you're playing. But remember, there are more runes than just the Keystone rune. There are important secondary runes to consider. In particular, Bone Plating, because it negates so much damage. Second Wind, you don't want to be hitting... Oh shit, there's a Galio. You don't want to be hitting your opponent with auto attacks over and over again if your auto attacks aren't powerful. If they have second wing, because they're just gonna heal up. And Hunger of Blood plus Biscuit Delivery. There is no best rune or item build, it all varies from game to game. For example, when I play Yone, I either go for Fleet Footwork or Conqueror. If I go Fleet, it is because I think I'm about to get poked out a lot. That also means I'm usually going second wind along with it, and I start Doran's Shield. The amount of sustain I get is insane. They won't kill me. Any mage won't kill me. But if I'm playing against for instance, another assassin, Ted, Akali, or even a bruiser like Irelia, I'm gonna go for Conqueror and then Hunger of Blood, because that gives me more trading potential. But the same applies for other champions. I see a lot of of, for instance, Ryze players. I see a lot of Ryze players going for Phase Rush. But if you're playing against an assassin, for instance, like Zed or Kiana or whatever, Aftershock isn't actually a bad idea. Now that they buffed Predator, I see most Galio players going for Predator, but remember, Aftershock is still a really good keystone if you're playing against people with burst. If you get to CC them right before they do their burst, you're gonna negate so much damage. So it all depends on what kind of a game you're willing to play. But this is something you should experiment with yourself, not just lock in the same runes and build the same items every single game, because, well, that really teaches you nothing. So for starting items, there's a lot you can derive from your opponent's starting item. That is, if they actually have put any thought into what they're buying. But a player who's looking to scale will usually play relatively safe with, well, moderate trading, if any trading at all. And they might go for something like a corrupting potion plus biscuit delivery in the rune, and then even teleport. Well, this is your typical, I guess, Syndra, Orianna, Ryze, whatever setup. And then as soon as they run out of potions, biscuits, and are low on HP, they're gonna push in the wave, do a cheater recall, and either walk back or TP back. But a player with Ignite and a damage burst oriented keystone like Press the Attack, Conqueror, Electrocute, Dark Harvest might go for a longsword or a Doran's Blade instead. Some even go for a Dark Steel, which is, well, now after the nerfs, not really my first choice starting item. Remember, you do not have to fight your opponent back. Just if you're looking to scale, if you're the one looking to scale, you can just keep your opponent at a safe distance. You just have to be wary of them roaming if you're playing really safe. That means leaving a ward in the lane so you can see which direction they go to or something. But if you're looking to play safe, then you should always keep track of your opponent. And if you're looking to roam, well, then you should make sure you have priority of the lane. But you also get to choose what kind of game you're willing to play. With your starting item and with your runes and with your champion, there's usually a lot of different ways you can play the game. Are you looking to support your jungler the most? Are you looking to solo kill your opponent over and over? Or are you just looking to scale? Remember, the starting item should vary depending on what kind of a game you're willing to play. And for additional, I won't go further into wave management in this episode because I will make a separate video for that. But wave management belongs to this category. Remember, when looking to set up a gank, you have to clear vision, and preferably you need to have CC. And LoL isn't a single player game, and mid lane is definitely not a 1v1 matchup. The higher in the rankings you get, the more people are gonna be in the mid lane from the second minute in onwards. There's gonna be jungle attention, there's gonna be support attention, and controlling the wave is just crucial for gank setup. One important thing to keep in mind is support roam timers. Obviously you can type to your bot lane in the beginning of the game and tell them to keep track of their support and always spam ping whenever he's missing. But as a general rule of thumb, you should be looking at your minimap every 5 seconds, which means you farm some, you take a step back, you look at the minimap, you go back. You farm some, you trade some, then you take a step back, you look at the minimap, and so on and so forth. And this is important because if you're looking to, for instance, help your jungler with the scuttle. Side note: you should always try and help your jungle with the scuttle because literally every jungle main will actually die for that scuttle, and they will not only die for the first scuttle, they will then go to the second scuttle that spawns at the same time. And if they died at the first one, you bet they're gonna go in and try and get the second one and die again. So help your monkey brain jungle to deal with the scuttles. But yeah, you should keep track of your other opponents as well. If you're looking to go help your jungle with the scuttle, then you should make sure that if you go and your mid lane opponent comes with you, then you're in a 2 versus 2 matchup or skirmish. You don't want there to be an enemy support or enemy top laner suddenly by surprise, because then you're gonna get, well, smoked, toasted. And yeah, that's it for this episode, or this video. Remember, think of trading like boxing. Take into consideration all the ways you can negate, heal up, or deal damage. And here's a happy Lee Sin because I mentioned boxing. And that's it for me. Thank you very much and good luck in solo queue. Bye bye.